Hey, what's up? It's LazyBrain here from LazyGamer.com, and I've decided today that I was going to put up some video tutorials on video editing on my channel, simply to put some stuff on it, and as well, during the summer holidays that's coming up, I'll definitely be posting much more commentaries, gameplays, and tutorials as well. But back to the video tutorials, I want to start making some tutorials on video editing simply because I've been video editing since quite a while, quite a few years now. And some friends have recommended me to do it, so I thought it was a good idea, and I'm going to be starting off with the simple tutorials, the fairly basic tutorials here. For example, this 3D letters, motion tracking and creating 3D letters or whatever you want. But I'm gonna be starting with fairly simple and basic tutorials simply so I can refer to them in more advanced tutorials later. So some of these tutorials might already be on YouTube, somebody else might already have done them, but I just want to have them on my channel so I can refer to them later in more advanced videos. I can just say, if you don't know how to do that, just go back, watch that video, and you'll know how to do it, and then you can go on from there. It will make more advanced tutorials much shorter in time and probably easier to follow, in my opinion. So let's get into this tutorial. Today I'm going to show you guys how to motion track your footage and then add an object to that. So in this case it's some text here, and this effect is used in many montages and edits and whatever. So a lot of people use this, and the good thing about this technique that I'm going to show you guys is that you only need After Effects, so nothing else. You do not need Cinema 4D, you do not need 3ds Max or Buju or stuff like that. You only need After Effects CS6 or higher, so be sure that you have version CS6 or higher. So work in CS7, CS8, even though that's not out yet at the moment, but it does not work in CS5 or lower, at least not as good as this. It's much easier in this version. So I'm just gonna go ahead and delete all the stuff I have here. I'm actually even gonna delete this. So this is as if you just open After Effects pretty much. First off, you're gonna go ahead and import your footage into your project. So usually you have two tabs here. Let me just give you the kind of default this is kind of the default layout that you have on After Effects. So that's really, if you're new to it and you really don't know how to use it yet, you have projects and effects, and then you have your canvas here, and then you got some more stuff here. I'll get to that in a second, and of course your timeline at the bottom. And I've actually detached, you can move all these panels around. I call them panels, some people call them windows, I don't know, it's up to you, but you can move these around wherever you want. So I tend to have my project or my footage right here, and then my effects here, and my canvas, and stuff like that. So I might actually do a more in-depth tutorial on the layout, but for now that's the only thing I'm gonna explain. And you can go ahead and simply drag and drop your footage into here. So in this case I have a clip of Underpass that I've downloaded on the internet, and go ahead and drag this to this little composition logo. It will automatically create a composition with the same dimensions as your footage, which is pretty cool. And as you can see, this is pretty simple. It's just a quick thing filmed and recorded in Modern Warfare 2 on the map Underpass. It pans kind of from left to right, and that's pretty much all there is to it, and it's that simple. So it's a very simple cinematic. And you might have noticed that all my tutorials are rather long, by the way. This is just a side note. I tend to go quite in depth in my tutorials. I'm sorry if it bothers you and I don't always go straight to the point, but I try to actually teach you something instead of saying you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. So that's kind of my way of doing tutorials. You might not like it, you might like it. It's all opinion. But anyway, let's get back to the actual tutorial. We're going to go ahead and track your footage first of all before even creating your letters or your text or whatever like that. So there's a lot of different ways you can track your footage. You can do it by going into effects and then somewhere here 3D camera track or something like that. I'm not going to go into that because that's quite, you know, searching it all up in the menus and stuff. It's not really needed. You have an effects and presets tab here, and it could be inside here. So this could be here instead, but it should be somewhere on the right side. I tend to move it up this way, and if you don't see it, you can always go to window and see all the little panels that are enabled here. Now you can look it up here. If you just look up here tracker, you'll see 3D camera tracker, or you can have this little tracker panel here that I have, and that's for the people that use the tracker a lot. I recommend you having this little panel here always enabled. It's very good. You just quickly have a few buttons and all the options in one little panel, so that's pretty cool in my opinion. It's not there by default. To enable it, again, you go to Window and you enable the tracker. So that's all there is to it. Then you select your footage you want to track. So in this case, the clip of underpass, and you click Track Camera. Now there's a few different options, as you can see here. You have Track Camera, Track Motion, Warp Stabilizer, and Stabilize Motion. These are very cool options. Now these two, Warp Stabilizers and Stabilize Motion, you probably will never use them in editing montages or video games in general. It's more used for actually when you film with an actual camera outside or whatever your footage is, just to stabilize it. It kind of tracks the movement in your camera, and then it's able, once it's tracked, it can reduce the motion, or it can stabilize your footage a lot, so you won't be using that much. Then you have Track Motion. It tracks everything that moves on your footage. So for example, if a person passes by, a character is running across the screen, then you might want to track motion instead of tracking camera. But in this case, we did track camera simply because we want to track the way the camera moves, or the way it pans over, because there's not actually anything happening inside your footage here. So as you can see, it did analyzing in the background, and then it also does solving camera. So once that's all done, you'll notice you have all these little crosses here appearing, and if you hover over them with your mouse, you'll have this little red circle or target, they call it. You can actually reduce the size here in the options if you want to, or make it bigger, and it kind of gives you in what perspective it is tracked here. Now you'll notice, for example here, that I have all these dots here in the front of my footage, but I don't have it in the back. Now they are there, so there's dots here in the background. You just don't see them because they're very, very tiny. The furthest they are away, the tinier they become. So, but if you go there with your mouse, you'll still see that little target appears. Now I have to admit, especially with video game footage, it will not be close as accurate at the far distance, or very far away from your actual camera, than it is up really close. So as you can see, this is much more accurate than all the way over there, for example. Now you can simply hover over it until you have what you want. So in this case, this would be kind of a good perspective here, or you can just select your points manually. So if you just select one point, and you hold Command on your keyboard, or Control on a Windows, or Command on a Mac, and you just select 3 points, it will do kind of the same. Or you can simply just hover over it until you think one of those is good. So in this case, I think this is pretty good. You right click it and you create text and camera. So it does both for you at the same time, which is pretty handy. You don't even need to create your own camera. So you'll have, once you've done that, you'll have your text, your 3D tracker camera, and of course your footage. And you'll notice that if you scrub through the footage here, right away your text is already tracked to your footage. Now let me just put this to fast draft. Now maybe you want to look into this, by the way, if you don't have such a fast computer. This little, I think it's kind of an electric shock icon, and if you click on it, you have a few different options here: off, adaptive resolution, draft, fast draft, even wireframe. That's even faster. But these are the different modes you can put your canvas in. And of course, if you put it on off, which is final quality, it will be much slower. So as you can see, when I scrub through this timeline, there's much more lag in between it. And if I put to fast draft, I can just scrub through, and it kind of pretty much keeps track of my scrubbing. So that's pretty cool. So you might want to look into that. Just put it to fast draft when you're actually working in your project. That's what I recommend. It makes everything much faster. So our text is here tracked to our footage. So that's already a good step, the first step. Now to make this text 3D, it's rather easy. Go ahead and click on the little triangle here on your text layer, and you have a few options. This text here, simply because you've right clicked, when you do, let me just quickly show you. If I add a simple text layer, remember this one was automatically added when we right click it and we selected create camera and text, so it automatically did that for us. But if you just add a normal text layer, a new one, So I just put some random text in there. You'll notice that there's much less options here. So once you go into the little triangle, you only have text and transform. This is because this text layer that automatically created for us is already 3D. So it's already been 3D and everything for you because you've created it from the 3D tracker camera plugin or effect here. So it automatically creates a 3D text layer for you, which is really, really handy. And you can disable it by click on this little 3D icon. As you can see, it gives you a little cube, and that means it's 3D or not 3D. Now let's get into actually making this 3D. Go into the options of your text, go into the transform options first of all, and then we're gonna rotate it so that it's actually standing and not laying on it. If you want to have it lay down, that's fine, but I'm going to rotate it in this case. So we're going to go in the X rotation and rotate it to about 90 degrees. So there you go, 90 degrees. And now you'll see it's rotated. Now it's not really 3D yet, in my opinion. Of course, you can move it around if you prefer to have it somewhere else and change it, of course. So you can just, I'm just going to change it to tutorial. And maybe make it a tad bit smaller. I don't know, that's really up to you. Totally your preference. I'm using the EXO bold font, by the way, if you're wondering. To make this text extrude, which is called extruding, and some people just call it make it 3D, you go into the options again, and this time you go not in transform but in geometry options, and here you have extrusion depth. If you increase this, you'll notice it will extrude the text like this, and it doesn't really look 3D. That's because we have no lights yet. But if you just extrude it, you'll see that it kind of makes it 3D. It doesn't look that good yet. Now you also have some other options such as bevel style. If you want to bevel, I like to have some bevel sometimes. Makes it look pretty cool. And you can actually give a different color to this bevel. If you go into the character panel here and go into the stroke color, you can actually change the color of the stroke. You might want to do that simply to see how it's looking, and so that you're still able to read it. So once you've done that, you want to go ahead and create some lights. Now that's pretty easy. Go to layer, new, light. Now you can also use Alt Shift Control L or Option Shift Command L on a Mac. And once you click on that, you'll have your little light settings panel popping up. You can call this whatever you want, and you have different types of lights: parallel light, spotlight, point light, and ambient light. I tend to use spot and ambient the most, but to be honest, you can use whichever you prefer. I tend to start off with the ambient light, and I usually set the color of the ambient light kind of to the dominant color of your footage. So in this case, it's a rather gray footage. There's a lot of clouds and it's kind of dark-ish. So it's not really really specific color. So I'm just going to leave it to rather gray here, and hit OK. It's going to just create a grayish light. Now you can't actually do much with this light since it's an ambient light, so it's going to be wherever you are on your footage. But let's create a new light. So again, layer, new, light. And this time we're going to create a spotlight. And I'm going to make it white. That rhymes. And I'm going to enable cast shadows here. And I'm going to pretty much leave this to intensity about 90%. And the cone angle you'll see in a second. We'll change that in a second again, just to show you what it does, because right now it's kind of difficult to explain. But go ahead and hit OK. It's going to create a light. Now you'll notice that sometimes your light doesn't appear right in front of you, so you have to look for it. And in this case, it's all the way up here. So you can kind of move it around here as much as you want. Make it closer or further away. That doesn't really matter. And oops, sorry. And see at what angle you want it on your text. So I'm just gonna go with a frontal angle right now at the moment. Now if you double click on your light that we just created, which is light 2, I can explain to you better what the cone angle is and the cone feather. Cone angle is how wide your angle is. As you can see, if you make it tiny, it will only actually light up the left part here, and the right part will still be somewhat dark. And so you can extend this to how much you want. Feather is how much of a gradient there is between light and non-light, so how much it diffuses, I guess, in a way. So if you set that to 0, you'll have a very defined area here where your light stops. So that's a very defined area, as you can see. It can be cool for certain effects, especially in rooms or something like that. So you might want to do that if you want to use, for example, your footage. There's a light in your footage, and you want to have a light like that. But in this case, we're gonna have the feather to 100%, and I'm gonna increase the angle here so it lights up most of the text. And hit OK. Now you can also, of course, change the color of the light to whatever you prefer. If you want it in purple, you'll see it kind of makes your text purple as well. So I'm just gonna leave it to let's make it white for now. And I'm just gonna decrease the shadow darkness a bit here. Hit OK. And you can actually add as many lights as you want. So if you want, you can also add a parallel light, which are actually pretty handy as well if you want to light up your whole text at the same intensity. So we're just going to quickly make a parallel light so that you guys can see. Here it is. Now it kind of gives you an origin point and then the way it goes. So sometimes you want to change the rotation of it. You can do that by going into the options here and go into transform and then pretty much rotate it. You can rotate it like this, as you can see, in the point of interest kind of thing. Kind of allows you to rotate it like wherever you want. So that doesn't really matter. That's pretty much up to you. But as you can see, it also kind of changes the shadows on the actual text, which you might want to have in a specific way. But that's pretty much how you track your 3D text here and add your 3D text. Now I might go into a second tutorial where I actually go much more advanced, that I start off from this point and actually show you how to add, how to make it a bit more realistic, how to implement it a bit more into your footage by adding reflections such as of the actual footage. So you would have these panes here reflecting on the text, for example. So I might go into that depending on how many people want that. But by the way, if you don't know how to actually change the color of your text, you can just simply change the color of the text in the character panel and then just change it to whatever you prefer. It's a very simple way of creating 3D text in After Effects. Now, one thing you need to know though, if you want to render this out and to have these jagged lines kind of gone away, because right now it doesn't look great quality wise. Let me just make this kind of red-ish, and then maybe this more dark, something like that. It looks a bit nicer. But anyway, if you want to improve the quality here, of course when you render it out, it's going to be on final quality no matter what you do. Except if you choose to render out differently. But you might want to also have the 3D text a bit higher quality, because right now it's still in draft mode. So if you click on your 3D text here and go on the top right of your window, it says render in and ray trace 3D. Now it doesn't matter if it says ray trace 3D or classic 3D, just go ahead and click on that button. And if it says classic 3D, make sure you change it to ray trace 3D. And if you go into the options here, you'll notice that probably the ray tracing quality is to 1, which is kind of the draft mode, and you can increase this to how much you want, but I wouldn't recommend putting it to 64 because it's gonna take much longer to render out your text. So but I'm just going to show you guys, just quickly putting on 7 for example. It will load your text for a while. Oh, not in this case, because 7 is okay. But you'll notice that the higher you put it, the nicest it's going to look, and there's an exact description of exactly what it does here. But if you put it to a final render here, you'll see that these jagged lines will mostly disappear. So there we go. As you can see, it's very smooth now, and everything looks much nicer once you've actually enabled that higher quality ray trace. So I don't know if you see that on the actual video, but I can tell you, if you zoom in already, you can see that the tracing of the lines is much better than it used to be. Let me let me just go quickly back to the fast draft mode. You'll see how jagged these lines are and how pixelated it kind of looks. So make sure to put the ray traced options to a little higher quality than 1. And of course, if you want to see the effect of that, you must make sure that your canvas option here is to off final quality, or you don't even, if you think, oh, that's good enough, I don't need to actually check, you can just render it out and it will just render it out in final quality. So that's it for this tutorial. I know it's been quite a long tutorial for quite a simple thing, but I just want to make this tutorial and tell me what you guys want to see. I can pretty much do whatever you see in montages, or you're curious to see how it works or how they made it. Now I can't always tell you exactly how people make something, but I can show you how to make something look the same or very similar. So yep, I'll be mainly using only After Effects. I do not have Vegas since I am on a Mac, so don't bother asking me tutorials on Sony Vegas. But hopefully you like this tutorial, and if you guys want me to make shorter tutorials and less in-depth, that's fine as well. Just go ahead and comment down below and tell me what you guys want to see. So I'll thank you a lot for watching no matter what, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.